Barton Dunant presents Organization for Crisis Communications. Hello, and welcome to the second of a series of 5 workshops associated with the creation of a crisis communications team at your organization. These workshops are designed for any type of organization, government, non-government, nonprofit, etc., and for-profit and/or private organizations. It does not matter what type of organization that you are part of. Everyone is subject to the needs for crisis communications. Every one of those groups can be impacted by a disaster and the 3 disaster phases of before, during, and after. Sometimes disasters impact one organization only, and most times they impact multiple organizations at the same time. These workshops are built upon a concept called POETE, which stands for planning, organization, equipping, training, and exercising. So this second one is the organization for crisis communications. How your team is going to organize to do crisis communications before, during, and after any incident or disaster. What exactly is crisis communications? It's a communications made by an organization, sometimes in collaboration and cooperation with others, representing that organization in response to an emergency. Crisis communications is not solely for emergency response organizations. It's for every organization to provide information to the public and its stakeholders, constituent groups, about how the disaster is impacting the organization and what the organization is doing, even if it's just a continuity of operations. There are also times when the crisis communication team needs to prepare reactive messaging that may never be used. If it is needed, chances are that that type of crisis messaging material cannot be quickly designed or approved during the actual crisis itself. Think about crisis communications in the same way we think about first aid, with the steps in order of check the scene for safety, have someone call 911, and then care for the injured. For crisis communications, you need to check the intelligence or information, also known as situational awareness. You need to gather the facts first. Call for assistance. Even if you do not need it now, you will want to have help ready in case something changes. Then communicate your message to the public and your constituent group stakeholders. There were a number of training courses, classes, elements, etc. available on crisis communications, some of which we will highlight in the 4th workshop in this series, the one on training. We are leading with the training from the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC's Crisis and Emergency Risk Communication, or the CIRC program. They highlight 6 elements that your communications should do. Be first. You want the information about your organization to come from your group, not a third party. It might be part of a larger group of communications, like from a government lead public information officer, or just a moment later shared via third-party service, for example, a radio station repeating snow days, school closures. But the official word comes from the school first. Not everyone gets the information from the same sources. Be right. Part of what we described in the check the intelligence situational awareness is where there is uncertainty, you do not want to repeat or solidify rumors or innuendo. Stay in your lane and take the time to get it right the first time. Be credible. Speak with authority and purpose. Transparency is helpful as well. Working with partners on collaborative communications helps with the credibility as well. Express empathy for the public, your own workforce, partners, etc. If the disaster hurt people, even if it had no possible connection to your organization, lead with that. If 3 people were killed during a tornado, your plumbing business should not lead with a press release of, "We're ready to help you rebuild your homes." Promote action. Encourage people to do safer things for themselves and their families. Ask for your staff to check in with supervisors to make sure they're okay and if they need help. Show respect for the victims, first responders, your partners, and stakeholders. Disasters and emergencies are very stressful times. There's no need to be disrespectful or indifferent to others. This misstep will become the story and a crisis to your organization itself. Here is how the pieces all fit together under POETE. In this workshop, we're covering organization, how to staff this role, including the backups and support staff. The other 4 workshops will cover planning, which includes the priorities before, during, and after an incident, equipment needed for those missions, training needed, and the concept of exercising these planning, organization, equipment, and training components via a stair-stepped approach of increasing capability and complexity. Here are some acronyms and short terms you may see in this workshop. If we missed any, or if there are any terms or phrases that we use that are difficult to understand, please contact us directly at info@bartondunant.com and note the workshop name and number. In the design of the communications team overall POETI, there are organizing objectives and strategic priorities. We believe these are some of the important elements of organizing before, during, and after an emergency or disaster. There are undoubtedly other elements as well. If you can think of any that are generic to any organizations, please drop us a line at info@bartondunant.com so we can improve this workshop. Hopefully by now you have a better understanding of how crisis communications is different from marketing or normal day-to-day corporate/organizational communications. It may be conducted by the same individuals, but the timing is very different, as are the stressors and outside impacts to your organization. We will cover a few more specific/tactical actions organized into 3 modules and provide you with an opportunity to practice creating some elements of crisis communications yourself. The preparedness phase is also the longest. It's also the phase you reset to after an incident occurs. Now is the time to do the training, do exercises, and to build staffing organization tables with backups to cover a number of scenarios that could occur. Don't forget from our first workshop on planning, disasters can be categorized into 3 distinct groupings: natural and human-made disasters, product and process disasters, and fictitious disasters. Every team needs a leader or 2, and these people should also be the alternate spokespersons for your organization, if your organization's executive leader is not available. Don't forget, this could be a 24-hour-a-day operation, so you may need backups and other shift coverage. Your team will need someone who can produce content for traditional media outlets, press releases, talking points, FAQs, speeches, etc. As part of the planning workshop, you should have created some sample templates in this area. Those can be the starting points and should have already been vetted by your organization's leadership, legal groups, etc. Your team will also need an additional person for digital media, different systems, content formats, etc. Also, that person needs the skills and tools to monitor social media and report back to the team the applicable intelligence gathered. There are people who will complain about your organization to social media, but not call or email your organization directly. The media can and will pick up on that aspect. If this incident is larger, longer in term, and impacting multiple government organizations, there may be a Joint Information Center established, or a JIC, whereby all information to the public is coordinated and controlled through that JIC. Your crisis communications team should be prepared to staff a liaison position, possibly 2, to each of the Joint Information Centers as applicable to the impact of the incident, to the disaster. Let's take a really bad situation. If a commercial airplane crashes into one of your office buildings, killing and injuring staff from your organization and others, as well as many on the airplane, there may be multiple JICs established, one at the crash site, one at the Family Assistance Center, and possibly other locations such as hospitals. You should consider having translators for other languages, including American Sign Language, on your team, on call from your staff or under contract from a third-party vendor. You should also consider whom within your organization who is not on your crisis team, who might be subject matter experts related to the specific disaster. Your building engineering staff, for example. They understand the impacts of long-term power outages to facilities, frozen pipes, computer system failures, etc. Finally, you may want to consider adding outside media consultants to your team, especially if communicating your organization's actions, position, reaction, etc., if it's beyond the capabilities of your crisis communications team. Now is the time to make those connections and agreements before something happens. Now it's your turn to practice. Please draft an organization chart for your crisis communication team and include some brief descriptions for the positions you would need and the number of people for each role. Depending upon how you are conducting this workshop, you can log your responses with your facilitator, or you can use our Barton Dunant blog post at blog.bartondunant.com/EPA, lowercase EPA, and select the Crisis Communications Workshop section under Organization and Module 1. The practice area for this one is the link called Organization Module 1, AWR-OC1. You can use that blog post to record your practice material in a reply to that post and view the work of others who have taken this workshop. The response phase has its own elements to consider. Now is the time to work not only to utilize the preparedness work done beforehand, but also to prepare to expand the crisis communications team with additional subject matter experts, translators, even backup and relief staff. This crisis could require 24-hour-a-day response by the team. You need to plan for more people. It can also be an opportunity to train new team members or prospective ones. During the response to the crisis, continue to document the time and resources being used. This is important for human resources, paid time off, PTO calculations, and possibly even submission to government for reimbursement or cost share. This is also the time to capture new material created. It may be useful for future scenarios. Capture also the roadblocks and challenges your team is facing, and think of both the quick fixes and longer-term improvements needed, and hopefully those will be approved by your management team for the next crisis. Now it's your turn again to practice. Please draft staffing requests for 3 additional team members using whatever staffing request process or forms your organization uses. This may be different for emergencies versus normal day-to-day operations. Also draft a request for both an internal subject matter expert to be dedicated to your team and an outside consultant as a per diem worker, a translator, for example. This will help prepare your team to understand now how these requests will be made during a crisis. Plus, it will help document the steps, forms, and approvals, etc. needed as part of your crisis communications team plan. Depending upon how you are conducting this workshop, you can log your responses with your facilitator, or you can use our Barton Dunant blog post at blog.bartondunant.com/EPA and select the Crisis Communications Workshop section under Organization and then Module 2. The practice area for this one is the link called Organization Module 2, AWR-OC1. You can use that blog post to record your practice material in a reply to that post and view the work of others who have taken this workshop. Once the crisis is over, there is an opportunity to formally reflect and capture information on best practices implemented and areas of improvement. This is called an after-action report and improvement planning. And by the way, this may well be beyond the traditional, and by the way, this may be well beyond the traditional response phase of an emergency responders. If, for example, your facility, production, reputation, or other areas continue to be impacted well beyond the public's view of the disaster, your crisis communications team may still need to be in response mode well into recovery. There may also be thank you communications that need to be created and communicated, and also anniversary messaging that needs to be crafted, or at least started, if applicable, based on the disaster. Think about an active shooter incident at your office and how complex the communications will continue to be in the days and weeks and months and even years after that incident. Don't forget when you start to demobilize your staff, contractors, and others on your team to include a critical incident stress debriefing to check in on them from an emotional and mental health concern. These disaster responses affect the responders as well, and you want your team to be stronger for the next one, not weaker. Last chance in this unit to practice. Prepare a sample staff evaluation form for demobilization, which should be part of your crisis communications team plan document, which includes elements of critical incident stress debriefing. Make some recommendations for additional staff training from your pre-approved training catalog. Highlight one aspect of training that does not currently exist in your training catalog, which would be helpful for everyone. Depending upon how you're conducting this workshop, you can log your responses with your facilitator, or you can use our Barton Dunant blog post at blog.bartondunant.com/EPA and select the Crisis Communications Workshop section under Organization and now Module 3. The practice area for this one is the link called Organization Module 3, AWR-OC1. You can use that blog post to record your practice material in a reply to that post and view the work of others who have taken this workshop. Congratulations on completing the second workshop. We hope you will take the next one in the series, the one that highlights the equipment needed for the Crisis Communications team, which is entitled Equipment for Crisis Communications Workshop 3. Once your team has completed this series of 5 workshops, please consider conducting a tabletop exercise with your team and then evaluate the results for modification to the POETE process. Then work towards a functional exercise and other exercises. Never stop learning something new, and practicing as much as you can.